the host of All In with Chris Hayes. Chris Hayes, he is the author of the new book titled The Siren's Call: How Attention Became the World's Most Endangered Resource. And actually, Chris, this is very connected.
Yep.
Because we're talking about the importance of a new generation stopping. You know, when I was growing up, most of my reading was Sports Illustrated, but I still would read books like The Abandonment of the Jews in college. I'd read The Rise and Fall, Shire's The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And I think we all did. We did enough reading to understand the horrors in a very real way. You have written a book, I think it's so extraordinarily important right now, about how right now our neurological structures, our evolutionary characteristics, the things that stamp us through evolution, our social impulses are being preyed upon by algorithms and then twisting those social impulses, twisting those evolutionary instincts, twisting what it is that makes us human. It could not be a more timely book. Could you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, thank you for that intro. Yeah,
The Siren's Call.
It's called The Siren's Call. And I think, look, attention is a faculty we all have, and it's necessary for survival, right? I mean, like, literally, it evolves so that you can hear the predator rustling in the bushes. And because we have this faculty for what is called compelled attention, right? Someone walks in a room and shatters a glass, a gunshot goes off, right? Before you have a chance to have any consciousness about whether you're paying attention to it, your attention is pulled, right? And because we have that faculty of involuntary attention, we now have a world in which attention is, I would say, the defining resource of our age. The largest corporations working at levels of intense sophistication to extract that attention and preying on that faculty we have for it to be compelled. And so we get more of the world. Our entire lives feels like a casino floor and Times Square and the buzzing of the phone. When your phone buzzes, that haptic feedback, that's a very smart engineer who came up with the idea that if you have that feedback, you're going to have to pay attention to the notification whether you want to or not, because it's actually talking to something deep in your wiring, and that is our experience of life.
Yeah, I mean, it's the phone that buzzes at us. It's the social media account that notifies us. Ooh, who's trying to reach me, or what am I missing? And it seems like some politicians have really taken advantage of this. Ezra Klein in the Times writes this week that Donald Trump, best of all, he understands that's his weapon.
That is the greatest insight that Donald Trump had. I think it came from a deep place. Like, I don't think Donald Trump sat around and theorized this, right? It's just totally tactile for him, his instinct that attention's the most important thing. And one of the things that Donald Trump really gets is that he will take negative attention over no attention. This is the key thing. 100%. Most politicians, when given the choice between negative attention and no attention, they're like, I don't want to make news. I don't want to polarize people. I don't want people mad at me. Trump will take negative attention over no attention every time. And what it leads to is this kind of attentional dominance. And you're seeing the effects of it.
What have we learned, Chris, about gaining attention? If people are tuning out, which is happening in a lot of this country, we've been talking about it again today, what seems to break through? What are the methods, if you will, of gathering or garnering attention?
It's a great question. I mean, I think part of what we're dealing with is, because of how that faculty evolves in us, that it's easier. The shortcut hack for getting attention tends to be negativity, outrageousness, and obnoxiousness, right? So we're constantly dealing with this kind of what we call the troll dilemma, right? That in any setting, if you don't care about negative attention, the best way to get attention is to act outrageously. It's a much harder thing to get positive attention. And that requires a lot more work. You know, it requires, to go back to Aristotle, like, the craft and art of rhetoric, logos, ethos, pathos. But that's a tougher climb than the kind of trolling that we see from, a lot of people prominently.
I've also noticed that it's making money to grab attention. You have people with podcasts or with whatever these platforms are today that literally every day think of what kind of rage they can throw
Exactly
out there.
right.
And
It's a business
ugliness. It's a business model, and it's taking in a lot of young people, especially.
Yes, and it's even a business model in politics. I mean, there's both, this sort of world in which everything is content, right? That
shock.
Shock, which again is a way of getting attention. The defining sort of social aspiration of the youngest generation is to be famous, right? Like, we know this through polling. But even in politics, I mean, I remember when McCarthy was deposed, right? When they came after McCarthy, you had members of the Republican caucus getting in the White House and saying, we are up here because people are trying to fundraise off of this stunt. Like, the only reason we are here is that people are monetizing the attention on them. And they all saw it for what it was. Of course, that's also true about the person at the head of the party. But they saw it for what it was in that moment, and their frustration was, we are trapped in something that we cannot escape from.
It's so hard on the kids, and it's so interesting to note that a lot of the people behind these platforms, the tech leaders, don't let their kids have phones for a long time in their lives, telling you that they know the damaging effects of the phone. They
have become, I think, radicalized. And one of the things I think we're seeing, and I think you're going to see more and more of this, you're starting to see it, is, Jonathan Haidt's book, about the anxious generation, which of course is a huge bestseller. This book is sort of about what it's doing to all of us, not just kids, because I do think sometimes we think like, oh,
I know.
It's kid. It's like, well, no, it's
no,
it's all of us.
Every single person.
And I think what you're starting to see is a really profound backlash brewing, and it's going to be enormous. The spring is getting pushed down and down. People's frustration with this attentional vortex we all live in, whether it's in politics, whether it's in our most intimate moments that we want to enjoy, there is a rebellion against it brewing.
Joe.
Yeah, there really is, and Chris, Mika and I were just talking last night and talking to several people who seem to be disconnecting. Now, I'm a Luddite. My children laugh at me. I try to go to the flip phone like every week. That usually lasts through about Tuesday or Wednesday. But we've started to hear more people talking about getting off their smartphones more, leaving social media. I mean, and we're not just talking about X, we're talking about social media. They understand what it took us years to understand about the casinos. It's rigged. The casinos always win. The algorithms always try to enrage you, try to suck you in, try to take your life away from you. I had a guy that called me up, a couple of months back when Mika and I were having a lot of fun on social media. Thank God we I'm not on social media. And he would call me like every 15 minutes. And he was just like pulled down. And I was like, dude, get off social media. You keep calling me every 15 minutes, and you kept interrupting me. I've got my 4 kids here for Thanksgiving, and so I'm good. This is the best I've been. I got 4 kids under my roof. This is the best I've been. Get off of social media. And I think he is. I think more and more people are understanding it's rigged. It's a casino, it's like you said.
And this is a really key point. We... one of the tricky things, right? The sort of quicksand of social media is social attention, right? Yeah. You go up through your life, and all the social attention you get is from people you have actual relationships with. Right. You don't get social attention from strangers in your formative years. You get it from caregivers, friends, siblings, people. So when you get social attention from strangers, which is what starts to come in on social media, you're conditioned to have it hit you like it's someone that you love.
Right.
Like it's someone you have a relationship with, right? But it's not.
Right.
And that experience...
And kids can't make that differentiation.
Exactly. That experience used to be a small, little group of people that had some measure of fame would experience this, and it would drive them crazy, right? This is like a trope, a cliche. Now that experience that, Joe, that you're talking about, that's been democratized for everyone.
Yeah.
So everyone, for the first time really in human history, everyone can have the experience of social attention from strangers at scale that only used to exist for a tiny... And it is really, really at odds with our wiring about what we seek from relationships.
And
with
if we could, I know we have to close this conversation, but can you imagine the nightmare for parents, okay? They take away the phone. They don't want the kids to have the phone, but they have to do their schoolwork on their computer.
Yes, exactly.
And then all the things are coming up. It's constant. They're up all night. I mean, these fragile minds cannot make the differentiation that you're talking about here. And we're seeing the uptick in suicidal ideation and other very, very negative behaviors because of how the kids are being conditioned through these algorithms. You can make a direct connection.
Yes, and even when it's not having the acute harm that you're discussing, to Joe's point about his friend, right? There's a deeper philosophical question of like, how do we want to live our lives?
Right.
And where do we want to put our attention? That is primary to what it is to be human at any age. And so even if you are not in that category where you're suffering from the most acute versions, the deep question is still there. To Joe, to your point, like the thing you want to spend your time doing is be with your kids at Thanksgiving, right? And yet there's this siren's call of something pulling your attention away from that, and reorienting ourselves around the things we want is the key.
Right.
The new.
So Chris, can I ask you what's then?
Yeah.
How do Americans? How do people across the world get away with it? I'm fortunate that a lot of people around me are very skeptical of carrying around smartphones and staring at them and obsessing over what people say who they've never met, never will meet. The question is, though, what is the bigger answer for all of us? What conclusions do you draw? What's the three-step process?
So I think there's, at the most basic level for people, forcing yourself every day to spend 20 to 30 minutes alone with your own thoughts. So that's just like the most basic, like what's the thing I can do? The second level is rebuilding a digital world and an internet that is non-commercial. We have had that before. The non-commercial internet is what gave us Wikipedia. It's what gave us the open web. That was the platform that incredibly created this productivity boom. Right now, our entire lives online are lived in commercial spaces. It's like living in a mall. You need to have public non-commercial spaces in the internet. And the third, and this is where this is going to go, is regulation. I really, truly believe that we're going to start to see attempts to regulate, whether that's capping screen time, whether that's age limits, whether that's other ways of saying that there's some public interest here in limiting or structuring people's relationship to this attentional vortex.
Chinese authorities would agree with you.
Yeah,
the Chinese authorities would.
Their kids don't see what our kids see.
Well, and one of the things
Yeah.
that's key, right, about the TikTok ban and the intermediate scrutiny the court applied is that the thing they said was because the ban was total and not content specific, it didn't trigger strict scrutiny, right, the highest level of review for First Amendment infringement. And I do think there's the content question gets caught up in this conversation. We need to separate that out from this attentional question.
This book is very timely and important. The new book is entitled The Siren's Call: How Attention Became the World's Most Endangered Resource. Chris Hayes, thank you so much. We'll, of course, be watching All In right here on MSNBC. And come back.
I'd love to.
I don't think this conversation is finished. Coming up.